Sacred space to me is where magic happens. Sacred space to me is where I can actually do some sandboxing mentally without worrying that it's going to manifest in an uncouth way, right? So I might be working out some limiting beliefs. And when I create a sacred space, then I know that those limiting beliefs aren't going to go out into the world and go crystallize. I'm going to go digging this out, digging that out. And that is a safe space to do that kind of work. Welcome to the Feminine Alchemy Podcast, where we explore the truth about the feminine, the peaceful, the wild, and the visceral. I'm your host, J.N. Behringer, joined by my co-hosts, Julie Dean Richards and Kaylee Rose. Each week, we explore the deep mysteries of the feminine and help listeners apply them to their daily lives in a practical way. Join us to unlock the hidden wisdoms your soul has been waiting for. Hello and welcome to another episode of Feminine Alchemy. I am J.N. and we've got Julie Dean Richards and Kaylee Rose here as always. Say hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Today, we're going to talk about something totally different. We've been on a wonderful kick of astrology and we finished that series. So go back and listen to it if you haven't already. But first, listen to this because it's great. We're going to talk about sacred spaces and how do we create a sacred space? Where are there sacred spaces in the world? And what does everyday sacredness look like? I'm like so excited for this. I'm excited for everything. That's how that goes. I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, we're talking about leaves. But I'm really excited for when Julie was like, oh, we should talk about sacred spaces. I was like, yeah, hello. Why aren't we already talking about this? So just to kind of open our get to know you question, as always, as we know each other pretty well at this point, but I just love that we learn little nuances about each other as each episode goes on. So here's our big question, guys. Are you ready for the
I don't know, maybe
the question. You're on the spot. Do you have a sacred space in your home and what does it look like?
Do you want to go first, Kaylee?
Sure. No, maybe not. My voice is trying to go away. So I used to have an entire room that was like mine. It was like my art space, kind of an office space. And in a lot of ways, I had set it up as a sacred space for myself. And then I needed to change things and I don't have that room anymore. And I'm still sorting out like, okay, where in my home needs to be a dedicated space for me, even if it's just a small space. And the reality is that right now I don't have a sacred space specifically in my home other than when I am in my bathtub. That is my sacred space. And there's a lot of like deep emotional work that happens. There is a lot of receiving of divine guidance, a lot of personal downloads. Like the bathtub, it is my sacred space.
Oh, that's my favorite. That's what bathtubs were made for. They were made for sacred spaces, that's for sure. As far as a sacred space, for me, we're on the road right now, but I brought a tiny sacred space with me. I brought like a travel altar basically with me, which is literally just like what I would say is like my altar cloth that I use on top, and then the specific crystals or things that I see as sacred, so I can set it up wherever I am because I don't have like a designated place. Although, everyone, we're looking to get a trailer. So after we get a trailer, maybe I will have a sacred space to put my stuff on. The other thing is I did want to say when I lived in a house, when I had a house, I had my sacred space was like my mantle. And I think we'll talk about this more later, but mantles are great sacred spaces. And the truth is oftentimes they're a sacred space, whether you think they're a sacred space or not, because they're a great place to have it because they're, where you're centered, where's the center, where are you looking at, where does stuff catch your attention the most? And oftentimes it's that. So yeah, those are my sacred spaces. What about you, Jan?
Yeah, so right now I'm grateful that I do have a whole room. It's a loft room, so it's like at the top of the stairs, so everybody can hear, and I can hear them too. That's the important thing. But, I have all my books. I have, like, if you see behind me, that's my altar. And I was thinking back as you guys were talking, I was like, have I always had one? And the answer is yes. Like, I've always had, like, not like a whole room necessarily, but like a dedicated tabletop for my special stuff. And that's really important. But even in times, like, I've lived with my mom, I lived with my husband's mom, so while our house was being built. And even in those spaces and places, I always had, like, I had shelves that had held all my things. And so I want everyone to kind of get in their mind, like, you don't have to have a dedicated room. You don't even have to have a house, right? Julie lives in a tent right now. But we can all cultivate sacredness in everyday life in a different way that is meaningful to us. And in those times where I had limited space, it was very often my kitchen was part of that too, because it's this magical place, right? Like, where all the magic is happening, and making all of that go really well, and like healing. And yeah, it's just, kitchen is like my secondary sacred space. And in my sacred spaces, yeah, we'll get into that. Okay. I love this. No, I love this. So let's talk about what is a sacred space and why does it matter?
Well, a sacred space is what it sounds like. It's a space that you have that's special and sacred. But to break it down for people, right? Because I think the example you gave, JN, is such a beautiful example of the kitchen. We often call the kitchen the heart of the home, right? It's the heart of the home. And in the same way, a sacred space is a space that you put intention into. And like Jan says, it doesn't have to be one specific room. It doesn't have to be a whole room. It can be a tiny little shelf. It can be 3 inches of like your window seal. It can be, anything that's yours. It can be on your kitchen countertop. It's just a dedicated space that you intentionally keep to remind you of the things that you hold dear, that you hold sacred. And it's a place where you can create and do sacred acts, or that you can take time to be with yourself and have calmness. And, just it's the sacred in the mundane, right? Like, it's this everyday place where we can go to feel that peace, and that's like dedicated for that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kaylee?
Just the idea that intention is so crucial to this whole conversation, that in reality, just about anywhere could be a sacred space, including your own body. It just depends on the intention and the presence. That's another key thing, intention and presence, that help determine whether a space is sacred or being used in a sacred way.
So good. For me, yeah, everything you guys said is so true. Like, the sacred space to me is where magic happens. Sacred space to me is where I can actually do like some sandboxing mentally without like worrying that it's going to manifest in an uncouth way, right? So I might be working out some limiting beliefs, and when I create a sacred space, then I know that those limiting beliefs aren't going to like go out into the world and go like crystallize. I'm going to go, oh, I'm digging this out, I'm digging that out, I'm digging this out, I'm digging that out. And that is like a safe space to do that kind of work. It's also a great place to like just play with energies and like talk to spirits and have conversations. Very often I'll create a sacred space and give offerings to just the beings that are around, especially ones that are associated with the land, but I don't want them to be like in my day-to-day life. So I create a container for that. So those are some reasons why I would bother with a sacred space, right?
Yeah, and I think you can think about this, like, I think a great culture, because we segregate this, like when we start talking about like the beyond and the veil and using it as a place where the veil is thinner and things like that. We can look at cultures like Japan, or even Latin American cultures that do this very well. In Japan, everybody has an altar in their house, like a dedicated, they call it an altar. It is an altar. Everybody has one. And what's on their altar is the pictures of their ancestors. Lots of them have shrines to their ancestors, because they feel that their sacred space is one where their ancestors can be safe, where they can visit, where they can commune, where they can ask for guidance. And when Jayan's talking about that, like, that's the whole point. You're creating a container, a specific place that is not all over the place, where you can deal with things, which actually helps your brain to be able to better process things. It helps your body to be able to process things. And so, our ancestry is often part of that. Think about Dia de los Muertos. What do? They create altars, and those are sacred spaces with pictures of family members and marigolds and things that they have. So I would say, yeah, like working with the veil is really common for a sacred space, and something that you might do with it and for your intention for it.
Yeah, I mean, the veil is our subconscious is part of the veil, I feel like, in a lot of ways too, right? So it's definitely, that's a place where we're carving out a space for that. Who has or has had an altar, and what is on it? What was on it? And if you had your way right now, what would your dream altar look like, and why?
That's a tough question. I want to throw the tough question to Kaylee first.
What? Jeez. Okay. So let's see. The question was, do you have an altar? And then also, like, your ideal altar? Were those the
Well,
questions?
what's on your altar if you have one? If you don't have
Okay.
one, or if you have like a subset of one that like isn't your dream altar, what would be on it though? Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So I wouldn't say I have an altar currently. At least not in a sense that it's very intentional. I have so my drafting table that I'm currently sitting at and using as a desk is like covered in all these things that I view as tools for supporting creating a sacred space, but they're just kind of thrown there right now because my life is a little bit in chaos at the moment. But so my last two children, they were home births, and my most recent home birth, I did create an altar space in my bedroom next to like the birthing tub. And I loved that experience. And I actually have the candles sitting next to me that were part of that, where one candle has stuff written on it from my husband as like the masculine support. And then the other candle has messages written on it from women who supported me in like my mother blessing ceremony that we did. And so I had a masculine candle and a feminine candle that were lit when I went into labor, and they were on there. And I just loved that. And so I'm feeling, as we're having this conversation, I just feel this desire to like, okay, where in my home can I like reclaim a space to set that back up? Because it doesn't have to just be this specific special situation of like, hey, I'm giving birth. It can be like, okay, this is my space that is a co-creation space that supports me in bringing into my life what I want, into shifting the things that I'm struggling with, and into feeling at home in my own space. So I'm grateful for this episode, giving me this sense of like, hey, Kaylee, here's something you can do that you haven't been doing because you're doing all these other things, which are good. But kind of reclaiming that space for myself feels like a really good idea right now. And as far as like dream altar, I mean, I don't know that I have put much thought into it, but there would definitely, like, I'm sure there would be a drum involved, and I'm sure there would be crystals involved and pictures of loved ones, but also bringing in floral elements for me, like jasmine in particular. That's a flower that I've really connected to my entire life. Just bringing in things that are, I guess, sensual in nature, involving my senses, that help bring me present. Because the way my energy functions, I can be very in my head or very off the planet. And so anything that helps get me more present and here, I see as a valuable component of a sacred space for me.
Kaylee, that's amazing. That's like, I love everything you said. I was like, yes. And it kind of leads into like you having this experience of being like, oh, I really need to reclaim that space. I'm sure so many women are feeling that with you. And also kind of leads into this, like, why is it even important in the first place? Like, why do we have these things? Because I think in our modern culture, we're like, go, go, go. And I very much noticed, oh, this is going to sound so bad, but like we love fake stuff. We're really into fake stuff. We are like, we're very into like when you think about decorating your house, you're like, oh, I'm going to bring in, this fakey painting that I didn't have anything to do with, or some, was made by something else, or I'm going to bring in these fakey decorations, these, fake plants and these whatever it is, wreaths and whatever we have, or these little signs that say these, from Hobby Lobby or whatever, that say these like cliche phrases. Like, we're super into that. And honestly, no offense if you're into any of those things. I love a good trip to, a home decor store. I'm all for it. I'm there. I'm loving it. I'm touching everything. I'm looking at everything. I'm like, I want to bring all of this into my house. But I think we have kind of this sense in society where it's like, oh yeah, we just up all these things to make your home look pretty, and that's all it is. Like, your home is just like this container. You eat there, you sleep there, you do things. And we talk about home a little bit. We're like, oh, our home and our heart. That's why I started with the kitchen thing. Like, we talk about the kitchen as the heart of the home, because deep down inside us, we know that home should be something special. It should be our temple. We talk about that in some settings, like it should be this sacred space where we can unwind, but we definitely do not treat it that way. And I think that affects everything. It affects the way you carry yourself. It affects your ability to really get into your body, to feel, to see, to release. It affects your ability when you're, mothering your children, or when you're doing a creative project, just like Kaylee said. Like, it affects you so deeply. And so reclaiming a space that's yours, creating this sacred space, creating intention in your home changes the whole way your home feels. It changes the whole way you carry yourself, and it makes your home just like, what's a temple for? It's for healing. It's for growth. It's for creation. It's for, rites of passage and ritual and ordinances. Like, that's what your home should be for too, right? Like, we've gotten so far away from that. So I just love everything you said, and just urging people listening, like, you can do this. I love the word reclaim. You can reclaim your home. You can reclaim the sacredness. You can reclaim your experience right now, today. You don't have to have tons of fancy stuff to be able to do it. If you've been craving something deeper, something sacred, something real, then this is for you. Listen, we get so much out of chatting with you on the podcast and online. We love your comments, your messages, your transformation, but it's just not the same as being together in person. We want to meet you. So we've created something incredibly special for you. We're calling it Into the Heroine's Heart. It's a 4-day women's retreat in the secluded mountains of Idaho, this June the 26th through the 29th. This is more than a retreat. It's a guided descent into the most tender and powerful parts of yourself. There is magic when women gather, and with daily rituals, astrology, shadow work, cacao ceremonies, drum circles, nourishing food, and the beauty of sisterhood, you'll reconnect to your body, your heart, and your wild feminine wisdom. This is going to allow you to live the podcast instead of just listening to it. We'll be putting all the juicy, delicious, visceral things you've heard about here into living physical form. You'll sleep under the stars, share stories by the fire, and leave feeling alive, whole, and aligned. There are only 10 spots left, and actually probably less by the time this gets posted. And if you're a Feminine Alchemist member, you get $150 off. So go to the link in the show notes, click it, and begin your journey to wholeness. Please join us for this once-in-a-lifetime experience. If your heart is calling, I hope you'll answer. We'll see you there. Back to the show.
This is a really important thing, because I think for a lot of people, this idea of an altar sounds scary and daunting and weird, maybe. But reclaiming your home, I feel like, is a little bit more accessible. And even in like some versions of crafting, like I've noticed times where I've done, like if you think about old flower crowns, like original, like I'm going to take some flowers and just weave them together. And you're going to have feelings and thoughts and intentions as you weave these flowers together, and you create something more than just, like Julie said, it's this thing you buy off the shelf that has no meaning. It has so much more meaning, and it has its own resonance. It has its own wavelength when you do a craft in that such intentional, like outpouring way. and then you hang it up in your home, and it's a talisman. It's creating something for you. It's doing something for you. And maybe you did it by accident because you're just that good, and maybe you did it on purpose because you love doing things on purpose. But that's like the real beauty of real crafts, is putting these things together, and then you take a step back and you go, oh my gosh, look what happened. Sort of like when you put that last piece in the puzzle and you're like, wow, the picture looks so different. It's popping off the page, when before it was just like all this conglomeration of little pieces. And that too has its own sacredness and its own resonance. And I find that even like with boxes of random stuff, they have their own resonance. And usually it's not one that I want to cultivate. And so sometimes going through these boxes of random stuff like really lightens my load, which is not even about sacred space, but it is very much about like how the space we have and the stuff we have creates the environment we live in. And even if you're not like, oh, I'm gonna stop what I'm doing right now, and I'm gonna create an altar, and I'm gonna put these like little caricatures of, I don't know, Brigitte and Vishnu on there, and I'm gonna, have some rose quartz and stuff and candles. Yes, I'm doing this. Like, that could be very overwhelming, but just being more intentional with the stuff you're doing on a daily basis. I'll give you another example. This happened to me today. I had like a session this morning, blah, blah, blah. And of course, like when you run a lot of energy, you get really hungry. A lot of food has to happen. So, because it just is, it's a burning of energy. So I went downstairs and I was eating venison, and I had made a jam from these ground cherries. Nobody else in my family likes ground cherries. They're so good. Anyways, that's a story for another day. They're so good. They're so good. They taste like buttery little currants. And so I made this jam and I put it on this home baked bread. And I sat there and I was like, this is just magic on a plate right here, because the venison is local. And in a funny story, I traded childcare for a deer, right? Like that's the most redneck thing you could do. And I grew the ground cherries myself, and my daughter made the bread. Like it was this little meal of like more nourishment than just food. And that's what we're talking about with sacredness, is bringing in that extra something else that's going to nourish you in more ways and create space in your life in more ways than just like face value. So that's that. But my altar is behind me. It's very empty. Normally I have it very full, and I love to have lots of little things on there and like a fun cloth and all this stuff. But my 4-year-old likes to steal my things and eat my candles and throw my incense around. And she really loves to take the incense ash and just throw it everywhere. It's very bare right now, which has been I guess a practice of minimalism when it comes to spirituality, like reminding myself that like more is not better, and like I will remember what I need to remember when I need to remember it, and I think that's part of that whole ADHD clutter needs, right? That happens. Like I need to have everything in front of me, but it's a practice of going, I can trust that part of me knows where my stuff is and it's organized and locked away. So that is my current state. But one of the most important things that I have heard is I don't allow those other beings to be outside of my sacred spaces, right? And so if they start to show up and be like, hey, I need to talk to you, I'll be like, not right now. And I just can tell them no. And then I have my sacred. So for example, like if I'm in my kitchen alone and there's no kids around, they can talk to me. Or if I'm doing active meditation in a sacred space, they can talk to me. But outside of that, like ancestors and sprites and the house spirit and all of those things that sort of live among us that we kind of ignore, those are the things where I'm like, okay, you can talk to me this time. Yeah. Or if I ask to talk to you, that's fine too. Creating that barrier gives them the space to actually talk to you and communicate, which is beneficial to both. And then also having the space where you're not able to talk to them, where you're like, no, you may not, gives you the more clear line of like, this is when I'm going to do my daily work, and I'm not going to be like a spiritual goddess and I'm going to be a normal mom. So that's my rant. What else are we talking about here?
Well, I think I see something on Kaylee's face. I have this feeling she has a thing she wants to say about some of the things that you said. If that's not true, you can just tell me. But I thought there was a spark in your eyes.
Well, I mean, I've had thoughts going through my head, but I don't know that there was anything like super specific other than just this thought of like, oh yeah, like you can create boundaries around your interactions with the spirit world. And I know that and I've done that, but I've actually been having a lot of trouble sleeping the past week and a half, and it just kind of hit me like, oh wait a minute, that would not be the first time I've been woken up by spirits. Like maybe I need to check into that. Maybe that I need to see like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I know why I'm not sleeping. Thank you for that.
That is like one of the trickiest things because we want the crystals near us, blah, blah, blah. But if you choose crystals that are meant to heighten your intuition and then you try to go to sleep, like they're all going to bother you.
Yeah, very, very true. And I think the concept of boundaries around your sacred space is really important. So I think it might be great to talk about, because we gave some examples of what's in our sacred space, but maybe just giving more ideas of like what could you put in a sacred space, and then maybe we should talk about like how do you make one? Is there something special that you do? And we can go from like totally minimalist to very fancy on that if we want to. But what are some things that you all think make a good sacred space? Like, what are things that you would put in there particularly?
I usually use crystals, mostly because they're good at. People think crystals are like magical, which they are to a degree. Um, they're very mechanical. They're very mechanical. They're very able to. They're just electricity. I don't know, transponders or whatever you call it. They are creating a sacred space energetically, like with physical boundaries, yeah, with electrical boundaries. So crystals are always a good thing. And I find that just burning incense instantly creates a sacred space. Like burning anything generally does. Like fire is an excellent sacred space creator. But even if I just burn some incense and have some crystals nearby, like I always have a nice chunk of obsidian in my chair, keep me grounded. Because that's what that's for. But yeah, those are like the main things is burn something. You want to bring in the four elements typically, right? So you have earth, fire, air, and water. So water can be represented by a shell. Earth is usually the crystals or some dirt and some. I've heard controversial things on salt being earth, but anyways, I don't want to talk about that right now. Fire would be like a candle or some incense, and then air, usually you have like a feather nearby to do that. What are some
Yeah, that's
things
a
you
good
use?
one. Yeah, I think when you said that, the four elements is very important to me. As you could tell if you listened to the elemental episode, call back. I love the elements. I'm deeply entranced with them, especially recently. But other ideas, the reason we want to bring in the four elements is because the idea behind it is like everything is made of one or more of these four elements, and we're bringing in all the four different kinds of energies, well, five with ether, right? So which would be like spirit. So you've already got spirit there, which you can symbolize that in many different ways if you want that to be symbolized. Some people use things like a pendulum or like a crystal that they feel is like particularly enhancing of intuition. You can use that if you're religious, like a Bible would work for that, or like some kind of sacred text or some kind of thing that's sacred to you for spirit. And then, air is this element that we've talked about, right? It's communication, conversation, it's that lightness. And a feather works great. A bell is quite often used as well. Bells are really great. Chimes. Some people use gongs, although those can also be tied to like earth vibration, depending on that. And then some people use incense or smoke as a way to symbolize air because you can see it in the air. You can also use, fire's easy, a candle, burning something, exactly like Jayanne said. And then, of course, we talked about earth. Sometimes though for water, because water can get tricky, For water, I actually had for the longest time this beautiful tea kettle, actually, that I put on my altar. It was one that was ceramic and was made in Vietnam, and my mother in law gave it to me from there. And so that was like my special water. But you can even do paintings of water. You could do a little cup of water. And then typically, like people on their altar space will bring in stuff from the different seasons as well. So, like, if it's fall, you bring in fall stuff and usually from the natural world, but you can do whatever you want. It's your sacred space. You can put in whatever you like to put in there. Other things that people put on their altars besides like seasonal stuff or the four elements, sometimes people will put divining cards or oracle cards or tarot. Some people will put tools, sacred tools that they use to help them or something they're trying to remember. And so sometimes that is a picture of a deity or a picture of an ancestor, or, it's something to remind you what you're working with and the energies that you're working with at that time. And that's why a lot of people turn to tools like drums is a great one. Kaylee mentioned that. That's a beautiful thing to have on an altar because it's that rhythm. So, long of the short of it. And then I do want to say one quick thing about altar cloths. An altar cloth, you don't have to have it, but the symbolism of the altar cloth is exactly what we're doing. It's setting the space, the intention. It's creating the container. That's why people have altar cloths. It creates that space where we can put everything. I was going to say, and singing bowls. Sometimes people have singing bowls too. I guess you could have a myriad of anything you want to have, but mostly it's whatever you want to put on there for intention. And sometimes people even put food on there altar if that's what they are working with. For a long time I used to have rose water on my altar. It was moon water I had created. So for people who are like, what do I do with this altar concept? It's anything. So like I'm looking, even in my mother-in-law's house, I doubt she'd ever say it was an altar, but like I'm looking at her, she has like this, I don't even know what they're called, this little old guitar that they used to have in like the 1700s, a lute or something. Anyway, she has like this lute and she has these Russian dolls that she got from Russia. You can put anything. I would say like that's part of her altar space. Anyway, Jan.
So my concept around this, and I want to give everybody like this really cool visual, is like you're creating a bubble, right? A bubble of spirit, and you're filling it with all of the pieces that you want to have in there. And so it's one part protection concept and then a lot of like really cool nourishment built in. And we're filling it with all of the elements because that's representative of our embodiment. So we're filling it with the reality. We're also filling it with something beyond reality. We're also inviting in stuff beyond reality. So it's a really cool little bubble and we're also bringing in a piece of ourselves, right? Like the Russian dolls are a self piece there. I always like to say, like, you can tell the witches, they have tablescapes. They have beautiful, like, little pockets of things everywhere. Like, yeah, that's an altar.
Sneaky altar.
Sneaky altar comes out of our minds regardless of what we think we're doing. And I think that the most, like, powerful decorating is actually just a series of little altars all over the place. You know, when I used to watch a lot of HGTV and they were like, there's a 3-item rule. Just have 3 items here. Like, yeah, power of 3 right there. Like, that's why this stuff works, because it is actually creating magnetism or creating discord in our homes. And that's why clutter is not a good idea. Not because clutter is like bad and wrong and evil. It's just because clutter what are you attracting with that clutter that you don't realize you're retracting? What are you creating with that clutter that you don't realize you're creating? I have so much to say about this, guys. Kaylee, what are your thoughts?
Well, as you were talking about clutter, I've been thinking about clutter a lot lately because like we have a bunch of people who live in my house. We have 6 kids, then my husband and I, we have ADHD going on. And then like ancestral patterns of holding on to stuff. So there's way more stuff in my house than I would like. And it's been this like, I don't know, battle I've been waging for years. And I want it cleared out. Like it's putting so much pressure on me, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And the past couple of years, my husband's gotten really on board and we're working on our kids now. with this idea of like, okay, what you bring into your space, it makes demands of you or it supports you. What demands are those things making, and how are they or are they not supporting you? And is it something you actually want to maintain and take care of? And so just realizing like, oh yeah, okay, like this just is another confirmation of what is in my home, like what intention do I want to set with it, and what stuff just does not need to be here anymore. And it can be really interesting to like get into people's why for why they hold on to stuff. So many generational things will come up, but I think sometimes the struggle for like curating what's in your home, the struggle for like, okay, I want this because it supports this versus I just want stuff because I don't know why, comes down to like, is there some energetic resonance with this item that actually doesn't have anything to do with the item? Like, is there some emotional connection? Is there some memory of a family member that like you maybe have a fractured relationship with and you just really want to heal it, but you don't know how? And so instead of healing it, you're holding on to this thing that represents it or this thing that is connected to that person. And it's just really fascinating to me how we could potentially use these sacred spaces, use these altar spaces to shift the energy of a particular object, to then be able to let it go or to be able to incorporate it into our homes in a way that's more supportive.
I have a follow-up question to that because you said something really important and all I could hear was people, especially people who have like older kids who are like young adults living in their house, like I don't control my space. How do you handle that? How do I make my space a little more sacred? Any ideas?
Well, this is what came to mind immediately to me when you say that question is, one is you've got to let go of control. Like you can't control what you can't control what you can't control. And trying to control it is just going to make you more angry and them angry and create tension. I will say though, because the first thought that came through was, well, you can also block off that energy from you and the rest of your home, right? You can make all the other pieces and places sacred in your home. And if your energy changes and the energy of the rest of your home changes, then eventually, oftentimes, that space will change. And of course, you can have chats with your child about it and tell them like the why behind it. But I do remember as a kid, like I was thinking about my room, I had so much stuff in it, all these like old things and posters and lights and all these little statues from when I was a kid. And we haven't really perfected this ability, like Kaylee was talking about, to be able to learn how to let stuff go or how to transform the energy of things. And, we have keepsakes. And I'm not saying everyone needs to get rid of their keepsakes. This is just like very fresh for me because I just got rid of my whole life, basically. I just had to like shed so much of everything that I have. And one of the things I was thinking about for my own children is trying to teach them from a young age, how to let go of things and that it's okay to let go of things and that it's okay, that something can serve us for a short amount of time and let go of it. And when they're a young adult, it's a bit harder because I think oftentimes young adults, they're in this stage where they're trying to differentiate. And so often what you say, they will be like, I want to do the opposite of what you say. And you don't know, mom, you don't know what you're talking about. And like, stop trying to get rid of my stuff that's special to me. Like, I remember I used to keep all these like little tiny scraps and notes, that people passed to me in class and everything. And I think, the best thing that you can do if you can't have a conversation about it and they won't listen to you about it is blocking off that energy and making the rest of the space that you can control a sacred space.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything that you just said. And even though I don't have like young adult children yet, my oldest is 12, but I definitely see in my kids this idea of like them wanting to have a say in their space, them wanting to have some degree of control. And so I've found that if I support them in having a dedicated space that is theirs, that's for their specific things, even if it's a small space, because we have a bunch of kids, we don't have a bunch of bedrooms. And so the reality is that there is a ton of shared space in my home. That's just how it is. But giving them a space that, okay, this is yours. You get to decide what you do with it. How do you want it to feel? what do you want in here? Is the stuff in here actually giving life to you, or is it draining you? And that's something that we're really working on now, is like teaching them, okay, how does this feel? Like, does it actually feel good to have all this here? And if it doesn't, what do you want to change? Rather than that desperate, like, I need all the things because I need all the things.
Such a good conversation. Who knew we were going to talk about clutter and things out of our control when we started talking about sacred spaces? This is why we don't structure the podcast like this is scripted. We are going to say this, and then we're going to say that, and then we're going to say that. Because that would be canned, but we go where the conversation's taking us.
Yeah, I think something I just wanted to say about that also, about us talking about this. I think part of the reason this is coming up now is because it's spring cleaning, that time where like this is a time of shedding and getting out and like reevaluating. Now the winter's over. We held on to it's that, shedding that continues to come as we are working through spring. So I love that.
Hey friends, it's Jayanne here. If you have been feeling really stressed out about the world lately, you are not alone. There's been enough crazy and fear flying around the internet that even I've been knocked off my rocker sometimes. But it's times like these that I'm really grateful for the tools I have to regulate my nervous system. I developed these tools for myself when I was going through the thick of it. My babies were young and I had a ton of repressed anger. And these tools help me through other stressful times, including negotiating my own divorce, having difficult money conversations, and of course, the whole COVID experience. And I've put all these tools in a method I call the authentic self-care method. This is different than other self-care programs because it is a framework for you to find your special sauce when it comes to self-care. And let me tell you a secret. Step 1 is not take a bath, get a haircut, or go to the gym. Step 1 is regulate your nervous system. And that's exactly what we do inside the 3-in-1 membership. This powerful program includes focused journals and meditations you can do in just a few minutes, like the fight or flight session, the hippocampus session, which rewrites your ability to see new possibilities, and the vagus nerve session, which helps you regulate your whole body in a crisis. Using these tools, members have reported feeling more empowered, more expansive, and many experience relief from actual physical pain, all for less than $2 a day. So join the 3-in-1 membership now so you can learn these tools today. The world is not going to become less crazy. The only thing you can control is how you respond to it. The 3-in-1 membership will help you do that, so click the link in the show notes to enroll today. We kind of talked about sacred circles by proxy of altars, but has anyone done a sacred circle? When do you do sacred circles? What does that look like? Why would you do that?
Yeah, I think this goes to the question of like, how do you make a sacred space? And of course, I think the number one answer to that is your intention. If you intend it to be a sacred space, it will be a sacred space. And that's basically the most minimalist kind. And we're doing that all the time, whether we like it or not. I did want to mention, right, like multiple places in your home can be sacred. You can make your kitchen sacred. You can make your living room. It all can be sacred. So, which comes to this sacred circle piece and like this dedication piece. So, one thing I'll say real quick before the sacred circle is talking about a sacred circle is that, if you haven't, and I talked about this on the in bulk episode, so go back. If you haven't dedicated your home, or it's been a long time since you've like actually dedicated your home or intentionally cleansed it and dedicated, it's a good time to do that. That's how we make the whole space sacred, is we give the entire home this intention that you hold sacredness and you hold a place for learning and you hold a place for safety, and putting those intentions. That can be done in a number of ways. You can do it in a chant, you can do it in a prayer, you can do it in a song, whatever it is, you can draw it in your mind. But if you have never dedicated your home, it's time to dedicate it wherever you live, even if that's like one bedroom in someone else's house somewhere. Like I said, I live in a tent. Okay. You can do this literally anywhere. So, but that aside, the idea of a sacred circle is that we're coming together. Usually you do not have to have multiple people for a sacred circle, but I will tell you the fancy version first, and then we can talk about paring it down, right? So the fancy version of a sacred circle is, the circle has been sacred for millennia, and millennia. We have always seen it as a container. The circle often represents heaven. And so when we create a circle on earth, we're creating heaven on earth. The circle represents a council. It's a place where we can come together. It's a place where we can balance things out, right? The circle is balanced. So when we create a sacred circle, often that is like you with your friends or you with your children. It's a group of people coming together with one intention. Now, fancy circle creation often involves things like drums. It can involve candles. It can involve shaking shakers. That's pretty common. Say sometimes sacred circles, often they require like you hold hands. They can require some kind of like dedication or prayer. You can have someone call, most often, just like our altar spaces, we call in the elements. That's very common. You can also, with women, I often like to call in the pieces of your cycle as well, because those correlate to the elements and the cardinal directions, which is something else. But you're basically just creating this space in whatever way. And what you want to do is bring in protection, intention and protection. So some people ask that angels be there with them. Some people ask, just like you would, like if you're just someone who's like, I've never heard of this before, like just like you would if you said a prayer or something, right? Like you'd be like, let there be protection with us, help us to talk well. Same thing. You're giving like an invocation. You're starting your circle by calling in grounding, protection, and just creating this space. And so I don't know if you want a step by step. Some people, when they make the circle by themselves, so let's say like you don't have all those people to make a circle and it's a circle of one, it's just you, because you can do this by yourself too. You can make a circle with stones. So you could put stones around you. You could do it with salt, or you could just do it with your brain. And you can imagine an energetic circle around you, or you can walk. I often tell people, because like the more physical it becomes, the more real it becomes to you and your body. So that's why like sometimes people are like, sacred circles look weird because you guys are doing weird stuff and like saying things and like you're all in this big circle. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, yeah, the reason we're doing that is because we're getting embodied. We're making it real. We're bringing it into reality. So that's why we're doing it. So I do recommend people, if there's any way that you can either walk the circle or you can draw the circle or like something that you can do, that is always more helpful, so that you can really visualize your container and you can make it real for yourself. So that's how we draw a sacred circle. I don't know. Do you want me to give like a step by step breakdown, or you think that was good?
No, I think that was good. I feel like a step-by-step breakdown is something that people can go deeper in as we either on the podcast or probably more likely in either your school or in the membership, because that's one of those things that you kind of want, at least in the first time, you kind of want a little hand holding, not necessarily that you're doing it wrong, more like, okay, am I doing this right? I'm like, I feel like I'm all thumbs. Like you just want to have that reassurance that like, okay, I'm not all thumbs. I'm actually doing it right. It just feels weird because I've never done this before. But if everything that we said made sense, then have at it. Like no one needs to tell you how to create a sacred space. Like I literally will just imagine bubbles expanding and there's my circle and that's it, right? Like that's, and I will say, okay, this is the dimensions of the bubble, right? It's sort of like if you're into any kind of like fantasy or Dungeons and Dragons stuff, it's like, oh, I've created a different planar structure and like only these kinds of things can go into this structure and these are the rules. That's how I run things. Dungeons and Dragons is just real life, but in reimagined. Sorry guys, I'm a nerd. Not at all sorry. Saves my life. But you just want to like have some clear intentions, and intentions can just mean like these are the rules of this space. And then at the end you want to close the circle. You need to finish it, because you don't want to just have like if you go on vacation and you have a bag of stuff that you've packed and you bring it home and you never unpack it, you've never closed that container, you're still like, part of you is still in vacation land and you'll never feel like completed. The same is even more so true with energetic circles. So just make sure that you close the circle, finish things. Close the tabs, guys. Close the tabs, for goodness sakes. I'm the worst at this, but it is another one of those like sacred circles that we open and never close. So yeah, but you can just literally just program it with whatever it is that you want it to be and say these kinds of beings can be in this circle and these can't, or it only goes from here to here because 1 inch further and you're into my clutter and I don't want you to bother with my clutter. Like that's I literally will be like, this is the space. I'm here, I'm in it, or I'm like adjacent, I'm connected to it, but it's here. That's it. Yeah. So have at it, guys. But if you feel like you want more hand holding, then that's definitely like we can go further into that, individually and stuff. So
Yeah, thanks for saying they're releasing. And because if you do work with things like the cardinal directions or like the elements or whatever, I know this sounds so crazy when we say this, but like they care to like be released. They would like you to like let them go on with their lives so they don't have to like constantly be holding that space, right? Which is why like in any religious setting or any like if you come from any spiritual background, there's always going to be like an opening and a closing, right? Like most programs create an opening, a closing, an invocation, and a benediction. Like that's the way that we do it. So that releasing piece, or else it's like we were talking about the clutter, like you're just holding that energetic clutter again forever, and people do that. So what are things we can expound a little bit? I guess we should also talk about sacred sites, but is there anything you two want to add about like things you might do inside of a sacred circle?
I can talk about some things that I've done inside sacred circles. So if I know I'm going to be doing deep healing work, even just by myself, or I'm going to have to confront something very connected to my shadow, something that feels overwhelming for me, I'll definitely do it inside some sort of dedicated space, some sort of safe container, some sacred circle. But also big life transitions. I like to experience them in a sacred circle, like giving birth, even like getting married, just like big life transitions feel, I don't know, there's just something about it that feels different to me when there is some sort of sacred circle creation. I have participated in sacred circles with the intention of fostering sisterhood, with shifting things on the planet. Like I remember, it's been several years ago now. Jan invited me to participate in like a food. Oh, what did you call it?
yeah, it was about shifting the food system.
Yes,
And
shifting
a
the food
couple of months
system.
before that, I did one on clearing the national debt. Yeah, we did that. I forgot about that. I was you when you said like for purpose, greater purposes. I was like, oh yeah, I did that, and then you just you just said that.
Yes, yes, we did do that. Where like people, and we were in different places. Like we were doing it via the internet. You can have a sacred circle via the internet. You set boundaries. They have to be a little bit more cerebral and spiritual than physical, but there can be physical elements for sure. Um, and you clear the space and you set the intentions. And I don't know if any of you listening or either of my co hosts have read the book, The Power of Eight. I haven't read all of it, but what I have read is amazing. And it's just this idea that where groups are gathered for a united purpose, we actually change reality. And this idea that you can shift things happening across the world, you can shift things in your own home, you can shift like just the energy of the entire planet through this unification of purpose. And that can be accomplished through this concept of sacred circles. And that's what Jayanne was facilitating in that I participated in. And it was beautiful. And I'd never done anything quite like that before. But now I do stuff like that, not all the time by any means. It's on a smaller scale. It's not necessarily global. But there's so much possibility for healing, for growth, for celebration within this container of the sacred circle.
Yes. And if you haven't read that book, it's worth reading or listening to, or just listening to. I think she has we'll have to look at the author. Marianne? No, I
I'll
know
look
who
it
it
up real
is.
quick.
Yeah. But if you haven't heard of that before, she still does those. She does this woman. The premise is she organized groups of 8 and she has them set these intentions, and she actually has worked with multiple universities to run legitimate studies on this. And when you have 8 people, these groups of 8 people, and they all have one intention together, it actually has measurable outcomes, like physical outcomes. It can have physical outcomes for the participant, it can have physical outcomes for the people in the group. And the interesting thing that she found was that when participants, I mean, it really does affect the globe also, but the really fascinating thing is when you focus on another participant, like sometimes they would focus on healing for a specific participant in that group, all the other participants would be healed even at a faster rate than that person too. So there's benefit for everyone. Like that's the beauty of the circle, is everybody gets benefit, and that's why we recommend them, and that's why they're coming back, I think, is because everyone benefits together. We all do it together, and there are measurable outcomes.
Yeah, so I looked that up. The author is Lynn McTaggart, and the book is called The Power of Eight: Harnessing the Miraculous Energies of a Small Group to Heal Others, Your Life, and the World. And it is amazing.
I'd love to read that book. That sounds awesome. It sounds so good. So let's shift gears even more and talk about sacred sites. And why would we go to a sacred site when we can unlock sacredness in our own homes? Because we just learned how to do that. What do other places have to do with our sense of connection to the earth, with our, stepping into our femininity, all of those things?
Yeah, sacred sites, we've probably all heard of this idea of a pilgrimage before, and this idea of going back to traveling to a place that's very sacred. And there's lots of answers to this question, but I would say, we just talked about the sacred and the mundane and how important that is. And you can tap into sacredness at any time. Everybody can. You can create sacredness in your home. But when you travel somewhere and you go to a specific site, it creates a journey, right? It creates this journey experience, and it creates experiences that maybe you can't just have for yourself. Not that your home can't be just as sacred. Of course it can. And of course you can have those, but it does open up possibilities. It does open up the ability for you to meet other people and to create more relationships. Some of these sites actually have like measurable electromagnetic activity that physically affect you. And this journey component in itself, I think, makes it worthwhile, because the journey, the joy is in the journey, and the journey is what makes something so, so sacred. And so I think the pilgrimage, like, it's worth it to go to a sacred site. And I would like to give an example. I am sure everyone has had, even if it's not, let's say it's not like a holy place. I mean, you've never been to a holy place. You've never been somewhere special like that. But I bet in your life at some point, you've been to either another friend's house or some place that you were in nature, whatever it was. And all of a sudden, like, you felt special. It's special to you. It's just sacred to you. It just opens up something into you. Obviously, I am incredibly biased because I'm a locational astrocartographer. I'm a locational astrologer, but places open up stuff in us. They do. They change things. They give us experiences. And so just imagine that, and then imagine going to a place that is sacred and holy and has all this intention in it that's been magnified by years and years and years and people and people and people. Like, you go to feel that, you go to open up what's in that for you. And sometimes it's not pleasant. Sometimes they don't open up pleasant things in us. Sometimes they're tough, but it just opens up new vistas and new pieces of us we've never experienced.
I love this. I heard somebody say that when we travel, we are unlocking little spaces and places that our soul had, like little Easter eggs that our soul had put in before we were born, or as we were embodying. And we're just unlocking energies as like finding little Easter eggs and getting those. And so it doesn't have to be like, Stonehenge, though Stonehenge is magical. It doesn't have to be one of those like world renowned sacred sites, but just anywhere that you feel super pulled towards is going to be really magical and unlock something within you. And you're going to gain a new skill, a new talent, a new energy that you've been kind of seeking for.
I was curious, have either of you been to any sacred sites before? Like any world renowned sacred sites or special places?
I went to a hot springs in Colorado. That's probably closest thing I've been to. I have no, you know what? I went to a monastery in Ireland, like a ruin. That was cool. And I used to have a really big thing with castles. So most of the European castles, like I've been to all of the Crazy King Ludwig's castles in Bavaria, the one, especially Neuschwanstein, which is the one that
I've been
the
there
Disney
too.
castle is. I love that castle. Ah, everywhere. So castles were really important to me. But I have not been to Stonehenge, even though I was like near it, I guess.
I can't say that I've been to a place that like immediately strikes me as like, oh yeah, everybody recognizes this as sacred. But I have been to places where it felt sacred to be there. Like, for example, in Switzerland, in Lucerne, there's this statue called the Lion of Lucerne. And it's in this like alcove in a cliff. And then there's like a lake in front of it. And it felt sacred there. Absolutely felt sacred there. Dachau in Germany, it was a concentration camp. You step foot there and you know it's hallowed ground. Like horrible things happened there, yes, but there is something sacred about that location that like even now talking about it, I feel it.
I have like chills. I had the same. I went there too, and the birds don't even tweet. When you step foot on the ground, you don't hear the birds. You go one step into the forest, you hear the birds. You go like it's gone.
Yes.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And then places like, so where the redwoods are in California, like Big Trees National Park, there's a sacred feeling there in those ancient trees. And even near where I live, it's called Craters of the Moon National Park. There's all these lava flows. It feels like there's a sacredness there too. So like, no, have I been to Machu Picchu? No. Have I been to some of these other places that are considered like the pyramids of Giza or like these other places that are considered sacred? No, I don't think I have. But places that have felt sacred, absolutely. Places that you just know there's something different there, absolutely.
I love that. It's so funny because when I asked that question, I was like, have I been to any sacred places? But then I was like, oh, wait, I think I forgot my whole life for like a minute when you guys were talking about it. But yeah, when I was in Japan, I was very lucky to be able to go to some sacred temples there, some Shinto temples, and those were really special to me, and sacred spots in Hokkaido. And then, of course, my husband and I, we've talked about this before. We lived in India. We went to many sacred Indian sites. We were able to see some very famous palaces, and of course, the Taj Mahal, which is one of the wonders of the world. And I will say, the Taj Mahal does not disappoint. I will tell you, it does not. I don't know. Some things are overrated. The Taj Mahal is not overrated. It is beautiful and it's so sacred. And for people who don't know, the Taj Mahal is actually, it's a grave site. So the whole thing is a sepulcher for the king's wife. He built it for his queen and he wanted it to be the most beautiful thing to house her. And so that special intention is really there. It is so, so beautiful to go there. The city of Agra is like so dirty and so ugly. But the Taj Mahal, like you step in there and it is so sacred and so beautiful. I would say, we got engaged in India in one of the most sacred places to me, which was the Taj Lake Palace, which is a palace that floats in the middle of the lake, which was beautiful. And then I was thinking, I have been to Stonehenge. We did go, and it was amazing. It's a different feeling. All these places have different feelings. They bring totally different pieces. Even though in India, I got to see so many different sacred sites, probably because it's on my Mars line. They didn't speak to me as much. Like the feeling of them was very different than like the feeling in Japan. And the feeling in Stonehenge was very different. In Stonehenge, it's, I don't know how to explain it, but cool and like mythical. It feels very like this mythical feeling, even though when we went, it was raining and pouring, like freezing buckets of rain. And I was pregnant and I had my little 16-month-old baby with me, and he was just screaming. Like, we were totally underprepared. I put this like tiny coat on him. He was just crying his eyes out as like this ice bucket just like gets poured on him. But we still loved Stonehenge. We still got a lot out of it. The rocks are a little smaller than you think, but yeah, so I got to go there. And then I just wanted to say, of course, I'm from where the redwoods are. I love Big Sur. I love the trees. I love the ancientness of those woods. Like, they are so sacred. Some mountains are so just beautiful. But most recently, because we've been traveling and going to all these cool places, I want to say like nature is so like the beaches are so sacred. Beaches are sacred places. They just like they're so healing. And we went to the Grand Canyon recently. And I hadn't been there since I was a little kid. And I just forgot like the breadth and the depth and like the sacredness of the Grand Canyon, like the beauty. And I felt that way about Zion's too as we were going through it. Like, oh, it's like so worth going. And you can just feel this deep resonance. And I've been to many other, been to temples, I've been to LDS temples, I've been to Shinto Buddhist temples, I've been to regular Buddhist temples, and in India we went to so many different, we went to a rat temple. That was a hard one because it's full of rats. But for me, it is. The whole temple is full of rats. That's what it is. It's literally a rat temple and it's full of rats. And so that one was hard to feel the sacredness. But I also went to the Golden Temple, which is recognizable. Anyway, I'm so sorry about this detour. I'm so sorry. But I just want to say, like, every place has its own sacredness. Every space is important and it brings something else out of you, and like you can really, you have access to those, and the journey's worth it. Like the pilgrimage is worth it. So
I love this. I do feel like every spring is a sacred site, and if you walk to a spring with intention, you're inviting that bubble of sacredness is now also like a moving bubble, and it is part of that, and everything you experience along the way is a part of your transformational journey. So that is my thoughts.
well, I was just at a spring. I forgot that one. Yeah, we
Ooh.
went to an actual spring. We paddled all the way there. We only saw one alligator, which was good in our paddling. But yeah, we paddled to this spring, and I will say, like, it changed. It like there's something about it. Like the water is sacred. Like it will heal you. It is incredible. Scientifically, springs are really good for you. Also, the sacredness is there for sure.
Yeah. So that is sacred spaces. Does anybody have any last minute thoughts on sacred spaces? Because I think we talked about this so much and it was so much fun, but I think that I feel complete in this experience, right? So if you are interested in creating a sacred space and you feel like you're all thumbs, please feel free to reach out to one of us. That's totally great. We can all help you with that. And we would love to hear from you. Like, what are some fun ways that you've brought in sacredness or sacred spaces into your everyday life, even if you're a newbie at any of this? So just let us know, like, what are you doing? Maybe you've got some cool ideas that we haven't thought of or that someone else could learn from. So just send us a text through Buzzsprout or, click on one of our links. Anyhow, that is our show for today. I hope you guys have a wonderful week and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please make sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening and share with someone you know. See you next week.